Coppelia, the girl with the animal eyes. Once in a town in old Galicia, there dwelt a mysterious old man named Dr. Coppelia, who lived in a small dark house on the city square. In all the windows and around the balcony on the first floor. Good. Yes, deep green curtains were drawn tight against summer or winter, sunshine or rain. It was as if the house and Dr. Coppelius himself were allergic to daylight. The people in the town gossiped about the old man all the time. They said he was a magician, a sorcerer, an alchemist, but no one actually knew what he did. What they said was simply rumor, guesses, lies. Now one day, Dr. Coppelius limped out of his house, walking unsteadily with the aid of a cane. Anyone watching might have supposed a great sorcerer like Coppelius could keep himself from aging, but in fact, the old man was painfully bent over. Reaching the center of the square, he turned and looked up at the balcony of his house. There, the curtains were drawn back to reveal a lovely girl with long blonde braids sitting in a chair reading. This was the first time she'd ever shown herself. Indeed, this was the first time the deep green curtains had ever been opened. Coppelia, he cried out, "My lovely daughter!" He waved, wrapped up in her book. Coppelia seemed not to notice him. Strangely, Dr. Coppelius was not concerned by her lack of response. He just rubbed his hands together as if well satisfied, then went back into the dark house. But someone else had noticed the girl on the balcony and heard the old man calling to her. That someone was Swanida, a beautiful village girl with long dark hair. She was glowing with happiness because friends, her young man, had just asked her to marry him. So great was her joy. She wanted to share it with anyone she met, and so she waved to Coppelia on the balcony. But Coppelia never looked up from her book. Sonida tried again, and still there was no reaction. "Snap!" she exclaimed and turned away. Just then she noticed friends coming up the street. She was about to run to him when she saw that he too was waving, but not at her, at Coppelia, sitting so still, lost in her book. Furious, jealous, stunned, Sonda shook her fist at the reading girl. Then she hid behind a fence to see what would happen next. Friends waved at her again and then gasped, blew her a kiss. At this, Coppelia finally put down her book, looked up and waved back. Sonida's heart fluttered, stuttered, almost stopped. Is this a new flirtation? She wondered in despair, or has friends been false all the time? On at one, old Coppelia appeared by the window leading onto the balcony, as if upset by friends' attentions to Coppelia. He drew the dark curtains tight shut, hiding his lovely blonde daughter from view. Weeping, Swanida ran off towards her own house, certain now that friends no longer loved her. Heartbroken, she suddenly noticed a butterfly or light on the ground before her. A butterfly, it seemed so sort of omen. Friends was like a butterfly, all right, flirting to all the bright flowers. He could never resist a pretty face. Sonida carefully picked up the fragile creature, turned and ran back up the street towards Dr. Coppelia's house. Friends were still standing below the balcony, gazing up as if transfixed. Hearing footsteps, he looked around and saw Swanida coming towards him. Quickly casting a smile of welcome across his face, he turned to her. Maybe he still loves me, thought Swanida. She reached out to him, but all he did was take the butterfly from her outstretched hands and pin it to his shirt. Such a cruel gesture, thought Swanida. He doesn't love me at all. How could you act this way? She cried. What way? Friends asked, sounding puzzled. To flirt with another just after we made our plans. But I never. You did. I saw you. But Swanida, friends cried. I love only you. She broke into weeping. I saw how much you love me. Suddenly, the square with moments before had been empty of people, filled with all their friends. The young man thumped friends on the back. The young woman kissed Swanida on the cheeks. Congratulations, congratulations, they cried. When is the wedding day? Friends grinned and tried to hold Swanida close, but she pulled away. There is no wedding day, she said. Her friends thought that a date had not yet been set, and their noisy celebrations continued. I love you, not her, friends whispered to Swanida. She thought about him waving and blowing a kiss to the girl on the balcony, and what she heard him say was, I love you not. Just then the burgomaster, the mayor of the town, came into the square. An important-looking man with an important-looking belly. He held up his hands. Friends, citizens, he tried to quiet them. Children, he cried, hoping to get their attention. At last they listened. Tomorrow we are to receive a great gift from the Lord of the Manor, a new bell for our clock tower, and a celebration to go with it. A real celebration. The square buzzed with excitement. Tomorrow, the burgomaster held up his hands again, meaty hands with fingers like sausages. To go along with the celebration, he cried, His Lordship has announced that he will give handsome dowries, bags of gold, to any girls who are married tomorrow." At this, all the girls gazed longingly at their sweethearts, but Swanida would not catch Fran's eye, even when the burgomaster gave her an ear of which to shake, and so here too love's message. All she heard was, "I love you not." Throwing the wheat to the ground, Swanida told her horrified friends, "We are no longer engaged. He loves that snob, Coppelia, the sorcerer's daughter." "Dr. Coppelia has a daughter?" asked one girl in surprise. "Who'd have thought such a bent old stick could have a child?" exclaimed another. "And Franz is in love with her, not me," Swanida told them. "How can you say such a thing?" asked Franz. "I've never even spoken to her." But his was lacked conviction. Night fell like a dark curtain across the square, and the street suddenly emptied. As empty, Swanida thought, as my old heart. Twisting a finger through her long hair, she went home alone. Now, as it grew dark, Dr. Coppelius left his house again, this time looking about nervously, as if afraid to leave his daughter by herself. He locked his front door, making a great show of it, turning a heavy key 3 times in the lock. Behind him, the lamplighter had just finished lighting the last of the street lamps, and the shadows they cast on the cobblestones danced about like revelers at a party. Just as Dr. Coppelius was about to drop the key into his pocket, a band of real revelers came by. They had begun the bell celebration early, and circling round the old man, they tried to induce him to join them. "Leave me be," he shouted, shaking his fist at them. He pulled himself away, and the key dropped unnoticed to the ground, just another shadow on the street. Not 10 minutes later, wanting to cheer her up, some of Swanida's friends came by with Swanida, about to take her to dinner. As they walked along the street, Swanida stepped on the key. Bending down, she picked up the key and knew at once who it must belong to. So did her friends. "Dr. Coppelius' house," whispered one, "the magic master." "Dare you?" asked another. "Will you?" added a third. Swanida guessed what they really meant. Would she go into the house and confront Coppelia's snobbish daughter? "Coppelia, only if you all come with me," she replied. The girls nodded one at a time. Secretly, they had each wanted to see inside the sorcerer's house anyway. So, hand in hand, they crept up to the front door. Swanida put the key in the lock. 1, 2, 3 times it turned. Then the lock snapped open. The door creaked as she pushed against it, and they were in. Now, no sooner had the girls entered the dark living room than friends came into the square carrying a letter. "If Swanida no longer loves me," he told himself, "I shall plead my case to the beautiful Coppelia." Franz was in love with being in love. He settled the top of the ladder against the balcony and started to climb up. Just then, back into the square hopped old Coppelia. Having discovered the key was missing from his pocket, he was hurrying home. But what was this? A ladder? Leaning against his house, angrily, he shook it until friends fell off. Then he hit the poor, lovesick boy with his cane until friends had to run off to avoid being beaten to death. Mumbling to himself, the old man went to his front door. To his horror, he found it standing wide open. In he went into the living room, his cane raised in front of him. Meanwhile, friends crept back to the square and, seeing the coast was clear, set the top of the ladder once more against the balcony and started up again. But what of the group of girls led by Swanida? When they first entered the darkened living room, they had lit a candle, which threw a flickering light around the room. "Who is this?" Swanida exclaimed, startled to find the room filled with people. The girls bunched together to stare at the figures around them. Some were sitting, some standing, some bent over, hands nearly touching the floor. "Out! We must get out!" cried one girl. Another started whimpering, and a third burst into tears. "Be quiet," Sunida commanded. "Look at them." She pointed to one after another of the figures around them. "I don't want to look," said the whimper, her hands covering her face. "None of us do," echoed the other girls. But see, they are not moving and not breathing." Sanida put her hands on her hips and laughed out loud. "They are just dolls," she said to her friends. "The old man plays with life-sized dolls." Indeed, they were just dolls, but what odd characters! A Chinese gentleman in long robes was perched on a stool. A clown in patches stood bent over from the waist. A knight in shining armor held his sword raised above his head, and there were others too, all in different costumes and poses. The girls went from one to another, no longer afraid. Then Sonida found the curtain that closed off the balcony. Opening it slightly, she discovered the most astonishing thing of all. Sitting in wheelchair behind the curtain, book in hand, was Coppelia, the old man's snobbish daughter. Her blonde hair slightly askew. "Daughter," she too was a Don. "Friends is in love with Don." Sonida giggled to herself. Just then, one of the girls accidentally collided with the Chinese gentleman, and he began to move. Nodding his head and throwing out his hands, the girls giggled. "Moving dons." Swanida suddenly remembered Coppelia waving at friends. The girls repeated it to one another. "Moving doors." "Let them all move then," commanded Swanida. One by one, the doors were set in motion, though none of the girls could figure out how to start Coppelia. beautiful and still. She waited serenely in her balcony chair. All of a sudden, there was a loud cry, and in came the old man, his cane held high. "Vandals!" he cried. "Intruders!" Juanita quickly blew out the candle, and Dr. Coppelia swung his cane around in the dark. This was too much for the girls, and they ran screaming from the house. "Oh, that is," except Juanita. Instead of running away, she ducked behind the curtain and hid on the balcony until all her friends had gone. At last, the old man calmed down and lit one of his lamps. As he walked about looking at his dolls, he spoke aloud with increasing worry. "They have touched my people. They know. But have they touched my daughter, my Coppelia? What a turn. He pulled aside the curtain and walked onto the balcony just as friends stepped in off the ladder. Grabbing the boy by the ear, he shouted, "You again! Please, sir, please." Friends said, "I love your daughter. Her still beauty has touched my heart. Please, sir, I want to speak to her." "Speak to her, huh? What you ask is impossible," said Dr. Coppelia. "But if I do not, I will die," Friends cried, hand over his heart. He had not felt that passion a moment before, but now he was certain of it. "Nonsense," Coppelia said. "Boys do not die of love. Come, have a drink and we will talk about this." Slowly, he drew Friends into the living room. Friends sat down and looked around the strange figures. He was so fascinated by them that he did not wait as old Coppelia poured an amber-colored liquid into a tumbler and then emptied some powder into it. Dr. Coppelia brought the drink over and handed it to Friends. "Come, my young friend, drink up and let us talk about my daughter Coppelia." Thinking the old man was at last warming to him, Friends took a deep draught of the liquid. "Ah," he said, "for it tasted of apricots and golden grapes and summer." He took another, sunlight and the wave of barley in a warm wind. Soon Friends grew sleepy. The magical potion had done its work. His eyes closed. He fell fast asleep in the chair, so still in his slumber he almost looked like one of the old man's dolls. "Well," muttered Coppelia. An old idea had come to him, one that he'd never had a chance to try out before. But now this meddlesome boy presented the perfect opportunity. He would take Friends' life force and transfer it to Coppelia. Then she would be his daughter in truth. Rubbing his hands with glee, the old sorcerer went to an ancient cupboard in the corner and unlocked it, taking out a heavy leather-bound book of magic spells. Opening the book, Dr. Coppelia read avidly for a few minutes before marking the page with a dark blue ribbon. Then he went over to the balcony and drew the curtain aside. Coppelia sat still as always, her book in one hand. "Soon, my little darling," the old man whispered, Soon you will have real life. He wheeled her out into the room, then went back to his magic book to read it further. Yes, yes, I think I have it now. Then he walked over to Franz and raised his hands over the sleeping boy, appearing to draw out the life force as if with an invisible magnet. Cupping the life force carefully in his hands, he hopped over to Coppelia and released it over her. To his astonishment and delight, Coppelia suddenly tossed the book to one side, then moved her head and arms in a mechanical fashion. Standing slowly, she began to walk stiff-legged around the room. Oh my God. My daughter, Coppelia cried, clapping his hands as Coppelia stiffly poked through drawers and opened cupboards. Then she crossed over to Franz and stood over him. Picking up the cup, she raised it to her lips. No, no, cried Coppelia, striking it from her hand. What are you doing, child? Why are you acting like this? He watched aghast as his beloved daughter began to race around the room faster and faster, throwing pictures from the wall, tossing aside scarves and ornaments. She finally kicked the old man's magic book to the floor. Stop it, Coppelia, stop it, Coppelia cried, grabbing her by the shoulders. He forced her to sit again in her chair. Just then, Franz woke up, his head muddled. Clearly, the spell had not actually worked. He moaned, and the old man turned to him. Get out, Coppelia cried. Get out! Eager to escape from that madhouse, Franz headed to the balcony and climbed back down the ladder at top speed. In a frenzy, Coppelia jumped up, raced around the room, knocking over all the other doors, then dashed out of the front door. What have I done? Cried the old man. He stumbled out to the balcony to catch a glimpse of Coppelia in the square, and what did he find there but the body of a naked witless doll lying on the floor. Coppelia, he cried, clasping her in his arms. Suddenly realizing he had been horribly tricked, for it wasn't Coppelia in the square below, but Swanida, dressed in the doll's costume and wearing her blonde wig, running after the fleeing friends. The next day dawned with pearly skies. The new bell was hoisted up into the tower, and beneath it stood the maidens who were to be married, along with their husband-to-be. In that group stood Franz, hand in hand with Swanhilda, for he now knew it had been she who had rescued him from the wicked Coppelius. From now on, she'd be all things to him, beloved wife and heroine. Heroine was well, just as the fat-bellied burgomaster was ready to pronounce all the couples, man and wife. Old Coppelia stormed onto the scene. Who will pay for the damage up to my house, to my people? He cried. waving his cane about. There was an awful silence. Then Juanita stepped toward and bowed her head. In her hand was the bag of gold she'd just received as her dowry. Here, sir, take this. All that happened to you was my fault. But the burgomaster stopped her. No, my dear, the lord of the manor has sent this extra bag of gold for the old man. All debts, all debts have been paid in full. Now let us celebrate. Dr. Coppelius left the newlyweds to their drinking and dancing. He wanted no part in their happiness, but high above, from her balcony, where the curtains had been opened wide, the door Coppelia sat watching the celebration. For once her book rested unread in her lap, and if you looked very closely, you could see a serene smile on her face as she gazed down at them all. That's all, I think. Okay, that's all.